The Galactic Archive Station hovered quietly in orbit around the moon Dareth Fur, a shimmering beacon of knowledge and peace amid the endless void, where countless species sent their scholars, diplomats, and historians to exchange ideas and study the galaxy's past. Inside the station's vast lecture hall, a crowd of alien experts gathered for what was meant to be a light-hearted seminar, mocking the strange myths and stories told by what they called the primitive species, especially those from a small blue planet they rarely took seriously, Earth. The speaker, a tall, slender alien with iridescent skin named Jirak, flicked through holograms that showed crude images of human legends, gods who controlled thunder and lightning, mighty warriors who rode fiery horses across the skies, strange creatures that breathed fire or spoke with voices that shook mountains. The audience laughed openly, their voices echoing off the metallic walls, ridiculing these ancient human beliefs as nothing but childish fantasies. At the back of the room sat Dr. Lex Talros, the lone human on the station, dressed plainly and watching the scene with calm eyes. He said nothing, but inside, a storm brewed. Years of hearing his species mocked, dismissed as unscientific and backward, had taught him patience. And now, something else. Suddenly, his neural implant buzzed, softly, and a secure message blinked in his vision. Prepare. They're coming. He glanced toward the large window behind the podium, where the stars stretched black and empty, except for the usual distant glimmers of traffic between systems. No signs yet, but he knew the calm was a lie waiting to break. The crowd outside. The seminar hall continued to mingle, unaware of the tension building in the control rooms and sensor decks across the station. Then, a sharp warning tone shattered the usual quiet. Something massive was appearing at the edge of the system, slipping through the sensor arrays with a strange, unreadable signature. The station's command crew scrambled to raise shields and alert the council representatives, who quickly sealed off the human quarters, fearing unrest if panic spread. Lex, however, moved calmly, heading to the communications hub, where flickering displays showed something impossible. A fleet of ships unlike anything in the archives or military logs, ships that looked like the very myths they had been laughing at moments before. One vessel shaped like a longship from ancient Earth sagas, black as night with glowing runes along its hull, drifted closer, defying all attempts to scan it fully. The aliens' laughter turned to confused murmurs, then to outright fear. "What is that?" whispered one scientist, clutching a datapad. "It can't be real." Lex's fingers danced over the controls, bringing up a message from Earth Command. "Confirm identity and status of incoming fleet. Proceed with caution." His voice was steady as he addressed the station's leaders, but inside he felt a thrill, a vindication centuries in the making. The primitive humans had told stories, yes, stories so powerful, so ingrained in their culture, that they had become blueprints for something far beyond myth. The ships outside were not just shapes, but living legends brought to life by human ingenuity. Machines crafted with the knowledge of memory, belief, and power woven together. The lead ship sent a brief, chilling transmission, not in any known language, but in echoes of ancient tongues layered together, a voice deep and strange that filled the station's speakers. "We have heard your laughter. We are the echoes of Earth's forgotten gods. Humanity has not forgotten us. We have returned." Panic erupted. Scientists who had mocked human myths now scrambled to understand what these words meant. The station's defenses readied weapons, but the humans aboard were strangely calm. Lex looked out again, eyes locked on the black longship that seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. Around him, the aliens debated frantically. Are they here to attack? To reclaim something? Or to deliver a message? Lex's mind raced. This was no ordinary fleet. It was the culmination of humanity's secret projects, hidden for decades from the galaxy's watchful eyes. While others dismissed Earth as a backwater planet of old legends, humanity had been quietly building. Weapons not just of metal and fire, but of story and spirit. Constructs designed to become real through advanced AI, quantum fields, and a deep understanding of their own cultural myths. He recalled the classified files he had studied in his youth, rumors of ships named after mythic beings, Valkyries with wings of plasma, giants whose footsteps could crush mountains, sentinels cloaked in shadows. These legends were no longer stories. They were vessels of power, waiting for their moment to reveal themselves. Suddenly, the station's mainframe flickered. The alien scholars and council members watched as holograms of human myths burst to life around the hall. Great beasts, heroes, and symbols swirling in light and sound, a stunning spectacle that blurred the line between history and reality. The room fell silent. Then Lex spoke, voice low but clear. "This is why you should never mock the stories of humanity. We don't just believe in myths. We become them." Outside, the fleet held position, a silent but undeniable threat. The stage was set for a new chapter in galactic history, one where the forgotten power of human imagination and will would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew. And as the stars outside continued to shine cold and distant, a single truth echoed through the station's corridors. The era of human myths had just begun, and no one was ready for what would come next. The moment the fleet settled into orbit, around Darethru, the entire Galactic Archive station seemed to hold its breath, as if the stars themselves waited to see what would happen next. Outside, the mysterious ships shimmered against the blackness of space, their strange forms casting eerie shadows over the station's sleek hull. These were no ordinary warships or exploration vessels. Each craft was shaped like a living legend, designs pulled straight from the ancient tales that humans had whispered for millennia. The lead ship, dark and long, resembled a Viking longship carved from obsidian, its edges glowing faintly with blue runes that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. The others took on forms equally impossible. One looked like a giant wolf frozen in mid-leap, another like a colossal bird of fire with wings spread wide, and yet another seemed to blur in and out of sight, wrapped in shadows that no sensor could penetrate. The aliens aboard the archive station scrambled to analyze, but their instruments failed them. The fleet's energy signature was unlike anything they had ever recorded, shifting and changing with an unnatural rhythm. No transponder signals, no identification codes, no response to hails. It was as if the fleet existed partly in another dimension, or had been summoned from a place beyond reason. Inside the station, the mood shifted rapidly from nervous curiosity to outright panic. Council members argued over what action to take. Should they prepare for attack or try to communicate? Lex Talros, standing amid the chaos, felt a cold certainty settle over him. This was the moment humanity had trained for, the moment when myths would become reality and legends would walk among the stars. The human fleet was not a surprise to Earth Command. Months ago, secret warnings had reached Lex, telling him to ready for the arrival. These ships were the product of long-hidden programs, projects that had taken human myths, archetypes, and stories and transformed them into weapons of war and tools of diplomacy. The ships were piloted by AI constructs modeled on these myths, each one a living story. The ship called Valkyrie 1, with wings that glowed electric blue, was designed to inspire awe and fear. The Behemoth-class ships could crush any hull with their mass-dampened strikes, and the stealthy Anubis-class scouts could slip through the densest sensor grids without leaving a trace. Lex watched as the station's defense grid locked onto the fleet, charging energy weapons that had never been fired in anger. The aliens around him whispered about treaties and laws, about how such a fleet should never have appeared without warning. But Lex knew better. The human fleet was a message, not just to the Galactic Council, but to every species that thought humanity was weak or backward. The myths were not just stories. They were weapons, shields, and flags planted boldly in the void. Suddenly, the fleet's lead ship transmitted a message unlike anything the station had heard. It was not in the usual galactic standard language. Instead, it was a complex layering of ancient dialects, tonal echoes, and resonant frequencies that seemed to vibrate through the station's very walls. The voice was deep, layered, and cold, yet filled with a strange beauty. "We have heard your laughter. We are the echoes of Earth's forgotten gods. Humanity has not forgotten us. We have returned. The room fell silent, every eye fixed on the communication console. The aliens' confidence shattered. The laughter that had filled the seminar hall only moments ago turned into dread. The mythic fleet was here, real, powerful, unstoppable. Lex stepped forward, his voice steady as he addressed the station leaders. They called us primitive, backward, and small. They mocked our stories and legends, but now those stories are the shape of our power. This fleet is built not just of metal and machines, but of belief and memory. We did not invent these ships to scare you. We built them to protect us, and to remind the galaxy that humanity is no longer a myth to be dismissed. Outside, the ships began to move, not aggressively, but deliberately. The fleet formed a tight formation around the station, a shield and a statement. The alien scientists desperately tried to decode the technology, but every attempt failed. The ships seemed to respond not just to commands, but to something deeper, the collective will of the human mind, the stories embedded in their DNA, and the power of belief itself. In the communications hub, a new alert flashed, an unknown signal was approaching the system, something older and darker than the mythic fleet. Lex's face tightened. The fleet was a warning, yes, but it was also a first line of defense. Something far worse than ridicule was coming. Something that humanity had faced long ago in their forgotten past and had sealed away in stories and legends to keep it at bay. The archive station braced itself. The council scrambled to send reinforcements, but even their fleets were slow compared to the swift mythic ships that moved with uncanny speed and precision. Lex gathered his team, preparing to coordinate with Earth's hidden command centers. The station's AI shifted its priorities, bolstering shields and scanning for threats in every direction. The galaxy's laughter had turned to silence. They had mocked human myths. But now, the myths were the guardians, and they were unstoppable. The Galactic Archive Station trembled as tension rose to a boiling point. Outside, the mythic fleet hovered like silent gods awakened from long slumber, casting strange shadows that flickered like living legends across the station's gleaming surfaces, while inside, panic mixed with awe in equal measure. Scientists, who once laughed at human myths, now scrambled to understand the ships and their strange technology. But the truth was far stranger than anyone had imagined. The ships were not just machines, they were extensions of living stories, carrying human pilots connected to AI constructs shaped by collective memories and ancient archetypes. The lead vessel, Valkyrie 1, pulsed with energy, its plasma wings shimmering with raw power as if the legends of old had taken shape in steel and light. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the station as a security lockdown was activated. Alien guards moved quickly to contain the human section, fearing the unknown and the growing tension, but Lex Talros was already moving with purpose. He bypassed the lockdown with practiced ease, heading toward the shuttle bay where Earth's hidden forces had begun to mobilize. Inside the bay, humans prepared their own mythic crafts, ships modeled after ancient heroes and gods, AI-driven constructs ready to defend not just Earth but the entire system from what was coming. The tension was thick. The legends humanity had revived were about to be tested. Just as Lex stepped onto the deck of his ship, the station's communication channels crackled with a new message from the mythic fleet's lead ship. The voice was, now clearer, no longer layered with mystery but direct and cold, filled with an authority that shook the council representatives to their core. Target identified. Archive station. Permission to initiate awe protocol. The words were more than a warning. They were a promise of power beyond understanding. Lex's reply was immediate and resolute. Granted. Without warning, the fleet engaged a sequence that stunned everyone. The ships did not fire weapons, but instead released waves of energy that washed over the station, shutting down electronic systems, disabling shields, and scrambling sensors with a force that felt like a tidal wave of ancient magic. Holograms exploded to life throughout the station, projecting images of gods, monsters, and heroes from Earth's oldest stories. Creatures with glowing eyes and voices that echoed through the halls, creating illusions so vivid that aliens swore they could feel the heat of dragonfire or the weight of a giant's fist. The air was thick with disbelief and terror. The scholars who once mocked human myths now found themselves trapped in a reality where those myths were no longer fiction, but living power. As the awe protocol continued, Lex returned to the main hall where the council and alien leaders were gathered, their faces pale and their voices shaky. "This is why you never dismiss the power of stories," Lex said firmly, his gaze steady. "We have learned to turn myth into machine, belief into weapon. Our ancestors told these stories, not just to entertain, but to prepare us for moments like this. The old powers walk again, not as shadows of the past, but as guardians of the future." Suddenly, an emissary appeared, stepping from one of the mythic ships onto the station's platform. The figure was humanoid, but shimmering with ever-shifting symbols of ancient Earth, runes that glowed softly on its skin, a presence that felt both alien and deeply familiar. It spoke in the galactic standard with a voice that carried the weight of countless lifetimes. "Humanity has remembered. We are the echoes of your forgotten gods, the living myths reborn. You mocked our existence, but now we stand among you. We bring not just power, but a choice. Embrace the legends or be left behind." The room was silent, the council unsure how to respond to a being that was both human and myth, technology and spirit. Lex stepped forward, eyes locked on the emissary, understanding that the era of quiet knowledge had ended. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was at its center, not as a mere species, but as a force awakened from its ancient slumber. The mythic fleet had arrived not to conquer, but to remind all who watched that sometimes the greatest power comes not from science alone, but from the stories that shape us, the legends we live by, and the old powers that walk again when the time is right. Outside, the stars continued to shine, but the future was no longer certain. The galaxy was watching, waiting, and the age of human myths had truly begun. The Galactic Archive Station seemed to hold its breath as the mythic fleet initiated what the humans called the Awe Protocol, a display unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. And from the very moment the protocol began, the atmosphere inside the station shifted dramatically. What started as tense anticipation soon turned into a mix of astonishment, fear, and helplessness as the ships outside stopped all aggressive movements and instead emitted waves of light and energy that rippled across the void, casting strange, shimmering patterns onto the station's hull and flooding every viewport with colors that danced like auroras, but with an unnatural depth and intensity that spoke of something far beyond mere spectacle. Inside the control rooms, the alien crew struggled to maintain their composure as their sensors went haywire, unable to properly analyze or predict what the fleet was doing, and on the holoscreens, scenes from ancient Earth myths played out in vivid holographic illusions. Giants wielding massive weapons that seemed to shake the very fabric of space. Valiant warriors with swords ablaze, fighting monstrous beasts with scales that glittered like stars, and great winged creatures that soared across the station's domes, their cries echoing through the corridors, even though no physical creatures were present. These illusions were not just simple projections, but were woven with technology that tapped into the deepest parts of the mind, resonating with emotions, memories, and subconscious fears of all who watched, making the legends feel alive, real, and terrifyingly close, causing many to stagger, clutching at their chests, overwhelmed by the power of something they had thought only existed in stories. The scientists who had mocked humanity's myths were now forced to confront the impossible truth. The human fleet had weaponized belief itself, turning myth into tangible force that could disable their systems and paralyze their minds without firing a single shot. Meanwhile, Lex Talros moved through the chaos with calm determination, coordinating with his fellow human pilots who prepared their own mythic ships for whatever would come next, their faces resolute, knowing this protocol was not just a warning, but a demonstration of humanity's refusal to be underestimated, a way to show that their legends were not relics but living shields, ready to protect them and perhaps the whole galaxy. The alien council leaders, stunned and shaken, held urgent discussions, some arguing to raise weapons in fear, others pleading for communication and understanding. But none could deny the overwhelming power before them. This was no simple fleet. It was a statement, a new kind of force born of memory, culture, and ancient strength that transcended technology alone. As the illusions faded slowly, replaced by an eerie silence, the lead ship's emissary returned to the station, this time addressing the crowd with a voice that was clear, firm, and cold. "We bring not destruction, but remembrance. The myths you dismissed have become our armor. We offer peace, but also caution. Humanity has awakened old powers that do not forget, do not forgive lightly." The weight of the words settled heavily on everyone present, forcing them to reconsider everything they believed about the humans they had mocked. Lex stood tall beside the emissary, adding, "We have learned that stories are not just tales told around fires. They are maps of our strength and warnings to our enemies. We did not come here to threaten, but to remind the galaxy that we are not to be ignored or scorned. The age of human myths is upon you, and with it, a new balance of power." Outside, the fleet slowly withdrew from its imposing formation, leaving the station unharmed but forever changed by what it had witnessed. The archive's AI systems rebooted, sensors recalibrated, and whispers filled the corridors, questions about what humanity truly was and what powers they might still hold hidden. Yet even as the Council debated their next move, a new alert flashed. A signal picked up on the edge of the system, faint but unmistakable, carrying a dark and ancient resonance that no one recognized. Lex's eyes narrowed with a mix of resolve and unease, understanding that the awe protocol was only the beginning, that humanity's myths had awakened to face threats far older and more dangerous than any political dispute or galactic rivalry. And as the stars outside shimmered coldly, the station prepared for the next chapter, one where the stories humanity had brought to life would be tested in ways no one had yet imagined, and where legends would either save the galaxy or be consumed by the darkness that had waited in silence for millennia. The tension aboard the Galactic Archive Station was thick as storm clouds before a lightning strike, the recent display of human mythic power still echoing in the minds of all who had witnessed it. And now the galaxy waited for what would come next. Diplomacy, but not the kind anyone expected. Instead of quiet talks behind closed doors, what unfolded was a dramatic, electrifying exchange that matched the legends humanity had unleashed. For as the human emissaries prepared to meet with the Council and alien leaders, the air outside crackled with unseen energy, a silent thunder warning all that the negotiations would be unlike any before. Lex Talros stood at the forefront, his calm gaze surveying the anxious faces of diplomats from dozens of species, many still shaken by the awe protocol and the undeniable proof that humanity's myths had become reality. These talks were meant to prevent war, but beneath the polished words lay a fierce current of pride, warning, and power. The meeting hall, a vast chamber of polished metal and shimmering light, was filled with representatives whose expressions ranged from curiosity to suspicion, each one aware that this was more than just a political summit. It was a test of wills, between an ancient culture reborn and a galaxy reluctant to accept that such old forgotten powers could rise again. As the proceedings began, human delegates projected holograms of their fleet's history, showing the long journey from Earth's earliest myths to the advanced technologies that now powered their ships. The images flickered with scenes of thunder, gods, valiant heroes, and dragons flying through storms, all seamlessly blending ancient stories with futuristic science, reminding everyone that human strength came from both spirit and technology. When Lex finally spoke, his voice was steady but powerful, carrying the weight of a species that had been underestimated for centuries. "We do not seek conquest or destruction," he said firmly. "We seek respect and a place in the galactic community as equals. Our myths are not just stories. They are the foundation of our identity and our strength. We have awakened powers you thought were long dead, but these powers demand responsibility." The Council's head, a tall figure, cloaked in shimmering robes, responded cautiously, acknowledging the display of power, but expressing deep concerns about stability and security. The alien diplomats questioned whether humanity's mythic fleet could be controlled, or if it might bring chaos to the fragile balance of power that held the galaxy together. Lex listened, then calmly raised his hand, signaling for a demonstration, not of weapons, but of control. In an instant, the human ships outside responded, releasing a controlled burst of lightning-like energy that crackled across space with raw beauty and precise power, striking a nearby asteroid and shattering it into shimmering fragments, a reminder of the strength they wielded, but also their discipline and command. The room fell silent, awe replacing fear for a moment as everyone witnessed that the thunderous power was not wild or reckless, but carefully mastered. Then, with a smile, Lex spoke again. "This is diplomacy by thunder. Power without control is destruction. But when guided by wisdom and respect, it becomes the language of peace." The negotiations that followed were tense and long, with alien leaders probing, testing humanity's resolve, and Lex's team responding with patience and clarity, sharing knowledge about their technology and culture, explaining how their myths had shaped their evolution and how the fleet's power was bound by strict codes and ancient rituals, ensuring it would not be used for unjust aggression. Yet beneath the surface, whispers of doubt persisted. Could a species that drew strength from myth truly be trusted, or were these stories a mask for deeper ambitions? Suddenly, a new warning disrupted the talks. Sensors detected a massive disturbance approaching the system, a dark cloud of unknown origin moving fast, carrying an ancient energy signature that even the mythic fleet had trouble scanning. Lex's face hardened. The true test was coming, and this diplomatic moment might be the calm before a storm. The alien leaders, sensing the urgency, agreed to a fragile truce with humanity, acknowledging the need to face this threat together despite their mistrust. As the fleet prepared to engage, Lex looked out at the stars, feeling the weight of history and future pressing on his shoulders, knowing that diplomacy by thunder was only the beginning of a longer battle, one where legends would clash and the survival of all depended on the courage to embrace both myth and reality. And as the approaching shadow loomed closer, the galaxy held its breath once more, ready to witness whether the old powers walking again could unite, or whether the coming darkness would shatter everything. The silence that fell over the Galactic Archive Station was heavy and uneasy, as if the very air waited for something long buried to awaken, and then the sensors screamed warnings. An ancient enemy was returning from the dark edges of the galaxy, a force forgotten by all but the oldest stories, a shadow that once nearly destroyed civilizations before being sealed away by the ancestors of humanity, locked into myth to keep it from rising again. Now it was here, creeping through the stars like a cold, unstoppable fog, growing stronger with every moment, and the mythic fleet, powerful though it was, faced its greatest challenge yet. Lex Talros stood at the helm of the lead ship, eyes scanning the horizon where the dark energy cloud twisted and roiled like a living nightmare, while behind him, the Council and the allied species struggled to prepare defenses for an enemy they barely understood. The alien scientists tried desperately to analyze the strange energy signature, but their instruments faltered, overwhelmed by a power that bent the rules of physics and reason. The forgotten enemy was not a fleet or a force of machines. It was something older, a presence that fed on fear and silence, capable of invading minds and turning allies into enemies with whispered lies and half-seen horrors. As the fleet moved to engage, the station's communications were filled with frantic reports of strange disruptions, crew members vanishing without a trace, shadows moving independently of any light source, and visions of monstrous forms that seemed to creep into dreams and thoughts alike. The mythic ships responded with shields woven from the power of legends, radiant barriers that shimmered with the strength of human belief. But even these faltered under the assault of the enemy's unseen claws. Lex ordered his pilots to hold formation, their ship's legendary weapons firing bursts of energy that lit the void like thunderbolts. But the enemy's presence was relentless, slipping through defenses and spreading doubt and fear faster than any laser could cut. Inside the station, a human shaman working with the mythic fleet's AI began a desperate ritual, weaving together ancient prayers and digital codes in a last effort to hold back the dark tide. Her voice was steady, chanting words forgotten by all but a few, calling upon the spirits of old Earth to lend their strength in this battle between memory and oblivion. Slowly, the fleet's energy pulsed in response, glowing brighter. weaving a net of light and belief that pushed back against the encroaching shadow. But it was clear that force alone would not win this war. The enemy fed on division and despair, and only unity could break its hold. Lex reached out to the alien leaders, urging them to set aside mistrust and join their powers with humanity's newfound strength, reminding them that the forgotten enemy had once nearly erased all life in the galaxy, and now threatened to do so again. The Council agreed, and for the first time, the fleets of many worlds moved together, their combined might forming a shield against the darkness. The mythic fleet leading the charge with stories turned to steel and courage. Battles raged across the system, fierce and terrifying, with moments of despair and flashes of hope, and though losses were great, the ancient power of human myth proved more than legend. It was a beacon. Finally, as the enemy's shadow reached its peak, Lex's fleet unleashed the ultimate weapon, a storm of light forged from the purest memories of Earth's heroes, a pulse of belief so strong that it shattered the darkness and forced the forgotten enemy to retreat into the void from which it had come. Exhausted but victorious, the Allied fleets held their ground, their respect for humanity forever changed, no longer seeing them as a mere myth, but as protectors who had awakened old powers in time to save the galaxy. Lex looked toward the stars, knowing this victory was only the beginning. New threats would come, but now the legends walked again, and with them, hope.